I wanted to ask you, Carlos, is this the year that a high school right-handed pitcher could be the number one overall pick in the MLB draft? Because Seth Hernandez, the right-handed pitcher at Corona High School in California, he looks pretty special.
Well, if you put a lot of stock into our staff drafts over at Baseball America, then yes, this is the year because I had the first pick in our first staff draft of the year, and Seth Hernandez was my choice. I think this could be a year for that. I mean, we've never happened. We've had a number of high school right-handed pitchers go second overall. Hunter Green, Josh Beckett, two prominent high school right-handers to go number two. Jackson Jobe was third back in 2021. So for whatever reason, that demographic or that profile is not one that teams have historically wanted to take in that range. I think for it to happen, you kind of have to have a real standout prospect, obviously, someone who is worth a pick that high in the draft. And then you also maybe have to have a weak top of the class, like to push you in that direction in the first place, whether that's because you think the high school right-hander is the top talent on the board, or because it's a situation where it's wide open enough that you can maybe search around and see if someone's going to take a deal. And if it happens to be the high school right-hander, that's the direction you go. But I think in terms of pure talent upside, Seth Hernandez, if I was going to personally make a case for the player with the most upside in the class, Seth Hernandez would be the guy that I picked. I think there are a number of other players that you can make credible cases for, but this is a high school right-handed pitcher with a great frame, has a lot of room to add more weight in the future. Not that he needs a ton of more weight or that you need to project a lot more in terms of stuff. He's massively athletic. He's a two-way player now and would be a legitimate shortstop and offensive prospect if he never pitched. He's got a fastball that's consistently in the mid-90s. He's been up to 100 miles an hour. He's got really good feel to land that pitch and to establish that fastball in the zone. He can spin multiple breaking balls. I think have a chance to become above average pitches in the future. Probably like the slider better than the curveball, but like they're both solid pitches, not true wipeout 70s now. But if you need a now 70 pitch, he's got that in his changeup. It's a pitch that he can dominate lineups with. It's rare for high school pitchers to both have good feel for a changeup and pitch off of a changeup frequently, because most of the top high school pitchers in the country can just kind of overwhelm hitters with their fastball alone. And the changeup is more of a chance to give those hitters an opportunity to catch up. But with Seth, the movement of that pitch and his ability to land it in the zone makes high school players look silly, and he'll double and triple up on the pitch. He'll throw it to righties and lefties. In terms of stuff and command, he checks all the boxes for me. He's been a consistent top of the class pitcher for, I don't know how many years, Ben. What was the first time you did a high school ranking for this class? I imagine he was probably the top. It was like him, Josh Hammond. There was a third that was kind of always in that group as underclassmen, but
It was him, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
well, I think when before Cam Caminiti, who ended up being a first rounder for the Braves,
Yep.
he might have been just ahead of him before he reclassified. He was like a lefty throwing 97 at
Yep.
16 years old and also really athletic. But yeah, ever since then, he's been the clear number one guy. I mean, Marcos Paz in Texas is a really good arm.
Paz
too.
was the third one
He had Tommy John surgery. But yeah, he's pretty much held that title for years now. He's all the things that you just said, and we have seen a high school pitcher go number one overall before. The Astros infamously picked and then did not sign Brady Aiken, the high school lefty, in 2014. They've gone number two. Hunter Green, like you said, when Royce Lewis went number one overall. Tyler Kolek to the Marlins in 2014 was drafted right behind Brady Aiken and one pick ahead of the White Sox taking an NC State left-hander, Carlos Rodon. Jamison Tyone went third overall to the Pirates in 2010, or excuse me, at number two overall in 2010, the year when Manny Machado went number three overall, and right behind, obviously, Bryce Harper that year. Josh Beckett in 1999, when Josh Hamilton went number one overall. We've seen high school pitchers go off the board too, like at third overall, Jackson Jobe. Same year, Royals took Frank Mazzucato at number 7. He's obviously a left-handed pitcher. Mackenzie Gore, a lefty, went third overall in 2017.
Yeah.
Ian Anderson to the Braves.
And I think that 2017 draft could be pretty informative because in that 2017 class, it was trying to pull up the board right now, but both Kyle Wright and Brendan McKay were in that class, kind of in that top tier, along with Royce Lewis, Mackenzie Gore, Hunter Green. And there were a lot of teams who really were hoping to get one of the college pitchers to either fall to them or they were really focused on them. I don't remember exactly what the bonuses wound up being for these players, but those guys were expected to be the safer profiles. And you look up now, would you rather have Kyle Wright, Brendan McKay, Hunter Green, Mackenzie Gore? How would you line those guys up? I think there's this risk association with high school pitchers, like the elite high school pitchers, that I don't necessarily know if it's warranted. I mean, maybe just recent year track record with guys like Job and Painter. I think the recent track record of these high school pitchers is actually decent. And when you couple that with the upside that you're getting from the profile in general, I don't know. I just wish more teams were willing to. And it's two things. It's like the risk factor is high, and just the ETA, how long you're going to have to wait for these players, also is not helping out their case. Like if you're a GM and you think, oh, I've got this next 3 or 4 years, do you really want to commit to waiting 5-6 years for your first round pick to just develop and get an opportunity in the big leagues? I mean, some of these guys have moved a little bit quicker than 6 years, but even still, when we've got college players basically coming off the factory line and going from big conferences in college to the majors within a year, within 2 years, I can see it being really appealing to take those profiles. But I don't know. I think there are real question marks with a lot of the other players in this class. And ultimately, I think Seth Hernandez has number one type upside.
I think,
how do you view it?
Well, I look in recent history, we're not seeing teams want to touch high school pitchers with single digit picks. You go back to 2018, the Padres took Ryan Weathers at number 7 overall. The Braves went 8th overall and infamously drafted and did not sign Carter Stewart.
Yep.
Teams don't want to draft Tyler Kolek when there's a star pitcher like Carlos Rodon available. They don't want to draft Jamison Tyone if there's an elite high school hitter like Manny Machado on the board when you have a top 3 overall pick. I think in general, it's a smart data-driven trend to avoid taking high school pitchers that early in the draft because the risk associated with those players is high, and the opportunity cost of what is typically available when you're picking that early, especially top 5 overall, is usually too great to take a high school pitcher when there's probably a standout college player, hitter, or pitcher, or a star high school hitter available. It doesn't mean the high school pitcher won't ever work out. I mean, obviously, there are great high school pitchers, and there are great high school pitchers who've gone in the first round and early in the first round, but you're trying to tilt the probabilities in your favor. You're trying to get more expected value from your decisions, from your picks. So it doesn't mean that taking a high school pitcher in the top 5 picks won't ever work out. But I say this as somebody who is more cautious than most with how I rank amateur teenage pitchers, whether it's international or high school pitching prospects. I don't think that you should, or that you can say that you should never rank a high school pitcher number 1 in a draft class, or that you should never draft a high school pitcher at number 1 overall, because, well, if you say you can't draft a high school pitcher at number 1, then how early can you draft a high school pitcher, right? Give me a number. Could it be number 2, 3, 4? Because the answer really should be dependent on what else is available. Because if you have a high school pitcher who's ranked number 4 on your board one year, all right, well, let's say something happens and the 3 guys ahead of him get removed. Well, he's number 1, right? Well, what happens if you're in a year where you have an outstanding high school pitching prospect, which we do this year, in Seth Hernandez, and the players in the other categories that you might typically prefer at the top of the class are lighter than usual?
Yeah,
I think you can make that case this year. If you want pitching, there's Jamie Arnold at Florida State. There's Tyler Bremner, and those are good arms. Are they great number one
Yeah.
overall type arms? Especially in Bremner's case, like there are bigger questions. He has not been a lights out starter this year, pitching in the Big West. College hitters, I don't see an obvious 1-1 guy
Yep.
from that group. Jace Laviolette, obviously from Texas A&M, came into the year
Yep.
in the top, but he has struggled at times. You can poke holes in a lot of other college hitters. I just don't see a single college hitter, at least right now, who I would put in the same category as some of the top guys last year, like Travis Bazzana, Charlie Condon, Nick Kurtz, JJ Weatherholt, or a college pitcher who's at the same level of Chase Burns. And then among high school hitters, I really like Ethan Holiday. He's got a great swing, bat speed, strike zone judgment, but it comes with some swing and miss. He didn't dominate the summer the way you would want a number one overall pick to, ideally. And then there's questions about where he ends up defensively. Billy Carlson, I mean, Seth's teammate at Corona High School. I mean, I'm a big fan of him. Is he your typical 1-1 high school hitter? I like him a lot. A phenomenal shortstop, but I don't think he fits that typical profile. And you just, you go on down the list of high school hitters this year. We can say the same thing a lot about a lot of these guys. So does Seth Hernandez ultimately go number one? My guess is probably not, but I wouldn't rule it out. And I think he has a case to be made if you want to take him there.
How much do we need to just bring in the Nationals and either their tendencies historically, their current position in the major leagues, their current state of their farm system? How much would that push you either closer towards taking a Seth Hernandez or further away, given everything we've talked about with just like how the class itself looks? Because
in terms of predicting who they will take, or
in terms of like if we're saying either or, I think you could probably fold in both of those there. Because like for me, I think there's a really intriguing young hitting core they have. If you immediately look at their team and like projecting them out over the next few years, I would think pitching reinforcements would be pretty high on their list. And so if you did have a guy like Jamie Arnold pitching like Chase Burns or Hagen Smith a year ago, maybe that's just like the obvious profile, like on talent. In terms of floor, I talked about this in our hot sheet show earlier this week. There was a question, who has the highest floor in the class? And I think you can make a case that is Jamie Arnold, just given what he's done in college so far, the lack of projection, how quick a lot of scouts expect him to move to the majors. Like he could pitch in the majors next year is a piece of feedback I've heard from scouts. But at the same time, his last 2 weeks haven't been really standout starts for him. He's not pitching like Burns and Hagen Smith did a year ago, where they were just posting and carving week after week after week. You mentioned with Tyler Bremner, who I would also think of as like a pretty fast moving high floor profile. Like he's had some duds this year in terms of just being hit around more than you would expect given his pure stuff and the competition he's facing. So would you look at the Nationals and say, given the makeup of their farm system, given the state of where they're at in their rebuild, does a Seth Hernandez make more or less sense for them? I think historically the Nationals actually have been one of the teams who they haven't been afraid to go with some riskier profiles. They have taken arms in the first round. It's been a few years now, but not quite this high. And I think the Nationals have also been pretty fortunate in previous years to where they didn't have to kind of do this calculus, because they've picked high in drafts where there was a very obvious player to pick, whether that was Steven Strasburg and Bryce Harper in back-to-back drafts. And even in 2023, when you've got Paul Skeens, Dylan Cruz, Wyatt Langford, and for all my depression about Dylan Cruz's first 5 games, like he was a very obvious, like he is one of these college hitters you were talking about that you want to have available at the top of a draft class. So I guess, throwing all that out at you, like how does just the Nationals being in the one spot maybe impact this chance?
I think the folks they brought over from Baltimore, their history suggests probably not
less likely,
high school pitcher in that spot. But if it were me, I just would want to take the best player available. And if that's if that's Seth Hernandez, if he happens to have the highest grade this year, then I would take Seth Hernandez. Now, at the same time, like there's just a lot of risks associated with high school pitching where there's durability slash injury risk, right? Workload. We don't see we just haven't seen a high school pitcher have to handle the same level of workload that we see with a minor league pitcher who's getting closer to the big leagues or with a college arm. It's harder to evaluate command. It's harder to evaluate pitchability with high school guys relative to the college players. In a lot of cases, maybe less so with Seth Hernandez because you're not projecting stuff with him. The stuff is present stuff, but it's, will the projection to the stuff hit, but also will the stuff atrophy? Like some guys have the best stuff they will ever have when they're 18,
Yep.
19, 20 years old. And then
Yep. You're pitching on a high school schedule. Right? You're not pitching deep into games. Yeah. And as you get older, you're pitching more frequently. You just can't maintain that sort of top end that consistently when you're pitching so much more in terms of volume. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't see them tested against the same level of college competition that the college arms are. And it's usually on the showcase circuit where we're seeing them throw, 1, 2, maybe 3 inning stints. And sometimes they go deeper into games in a tournament setting for their travel team, but it's not often, especially in their draft the summer before their draft, or it's happening in the spring, maybe against weaker high school hitters. I think you could make the argument that we are better able to evaluate pitchers now compared to 5-10 years ago because the tools at our disposal to measure and quantify the stuff coming out of a pitcher's hand with TrackMan and other tools are things that we didn't have available, even 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think it can also give a false sense of confidence in terms of overlooking the risk that's just always going to be inherent with young pitching.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating conversation. And as we continue, like my hope this year was that we would get someone to like take hold of 1-1 and become this no doubter at the top of the class, because entering the year we had Jace Laviolette 1, we had Ethan Holiday 2. A lot of the same guys who we had at the top are still kind of in that fold, but the number of players in consideration for the number 1 overall pick, I feel like has only grown since the season has started. It has not been a situation where we're kind of starting to narrow down the potential options. And even this past week, like I'm talking with scouts for teams who are picking high in the draft, and when I ask them like, hey, how are you guys feeling, it's a lot of shrugs and a lot of like, who knows, like we're still scouting all of them up because there's no clear and obvious player. So it's a weird year, and maybe because it's a weird year, everything is just going to line up for Seth Hernandez to set some history. Last year we had the first ever second baseman, first ever Australian go 1-1. It would be kind of fun in just a sort of draft nerd perspective to see a high school righty go 1-1.